The chosen male. The great hall of the alien empire was filled with whispers and fear as the alien queen rose from her throne, her eyes like burning fire and her voice like thunder rolling across the stars. She declared that she would take a mate, but only one strong enough to face her and survive. The galaxy trembled at her words, because all knew that no warrior had ever pleased her, no soldier had ever made her body respond, and no consort had ever lasted more than a single night. Her hunger was deadly, her power unmatched, and her fury endless. Across the empire, champions of many worlds tried to claim the honor, huge beasts with iron skin, tall warriors with burning blades, and proud princes with hearts full of arrogance. Yet each one failed, broken and cast aside, their bodies torn and their pride destroyed. The queen laughed at them, mocking their weakness, mocking the very idea that anyone could satisfy her. The court cheered and jeered, delighted in her cruelty. For the queen was feared and loved in equal measure. Her rage was entertainment, her scorn a show for the galaxy. And then, in the corner of the hall, a small figure stood, not armored, not glowing with alien energy, not covered in scales or claws, but simple, quiet, and strangely calm. It was a human male, chosen not because he was strong, but because the court wanted a joke. They wanted to see him fail. They wanted to see the queen crush him in an instant. Laughter filled the room when his name was called. The nobles whispered that the queen would tear him apart before the first hour. The guards shook their heads, certain he would die before he even touched her. The human walked forward with steady steps, his eyes calm, his body unshaken. The queen narrowed her gaze at him. Wondering why this tiny creature showed no fear, she leaned forward on her throne and asked if he understood what he faced. He bowed his head but did not tremble. He said he understood, and his voice carried through the hall, quiet yet firm. The nobles laughed again, but the queen did not laugh. Something about him was different. Something about the way he stood made her uneasy, though she would never admit it. That night, the queen allowed him in her chamber, a place of danger, a place where no suitor had ever returned with pride. The walls glowed with alien fire, and the air was heavy with strange energy. She circled him like a predator circles its prey, waiting for the moment his courage would break, waiting for him to beg for mercy. Yet he did not break. He simply watched her with steady eyes. His calmness made her angry. His stillness made her restless. She struck him with words sharp as blades, asking why a weak human thought he could please a queen. He answered with no arrogance, no pride, only quiet certainty. He said that humans were small but not weak, fragile but not empty. He said there were things inside humans that other species did not understand, and sometimes the smallest flame could burn brighter than the largest star. His words were strange to her, but they lingered in her mind even as she laughed at him. She thought he was foolish, but the way he spoke made her heart shift, though she tried to deny it, though she told herself it was nothing. When she touched him for the first time, something happened that had never happened before. Her body reacted, her power surged, her skin burned with a fire she had never felt. She gasped in disbelief. Her mind screamed that it was impossible, yet her body betrayed her. The human stood steady, as if he had known this would happen, as if he had expected it all along. The queen's fury exploded. She pushed him away. She roared at him, her voice shaking the walls, her heart racing with anger and confusion. The guards rushed into the chamber, their weapons drawn, ready to strike down the human. But the queen stopped them with a single raised hand. Her chest heaved with rage, yet beneath her rage was fear, fear of what this meant, fear of what had just begun. She stared at the human, her eyes blazing, demanding to know what trick he had used. But he spoke no word. He only met her gaze, calm and silent, as if silence itself was his weapon, and that silence was louder than any cry. The queen turned away, gripping her throne with claws that carved deep scars into the metal, her fury rising like a storm. Yet inside her was a secret she could not ignore. She felt the impossible growing within her. She felt life where there had been none before. The hall outside still echoed with laughter, but soon the galaxy would not laugh. Soon the galaxy would tremble, for in that single moment, The fate of empires had changed, and the queen knew it. She was enraged, more enraged than ever before. But behind her fury was something darker, something deeper, a truth that she could not stop, the truth that the human had done what no alien had ever done, and she would never forgive him for it. The queen's fury. The morning came with a heavy silence inside the grand palace. The alien queen sat on her throne with her claws digging into the arms of the seat, her eyes burning with fire that shook even her bravest guards. The court stood frozen as she rose to her feet, her voice thundering across the hall as she shouted that a crime had been done, that the impossible had happened, and that the galaxy itself had been mocked by a single weak creature from Earth. Her words cut through the crowd like blades. Every noble and soldier lowered their gaze, none daring to meet her eyes. The queen's fury was like a storm without end, and when she turned her gaze toward the human male standing at the center of the hall, all knew he would be crushed. All expected him to fall to his knees and beg for his life. Yet he did not. He stood calm, his eyes steady, his face free of fear. And this calmness only made her rage burn hotter, for she could not understand it. She could not control it. The queen shouted that he had used trickery, that no human could ever bring life into her body with a single touch. She demanded her scientists to scan him, to tear apart his secrets. The guards surrounded him with their blades raised. But the human did not move. He looked at her with quiet defiance, as if daring her to kill him, as if daring her to face the truth she feared. The court held its breath, waiting for the queen to order his death. But her voice faltered, her chest heaved, and her mind screamed with doubt. The royal scientists rushed forward with their glowing devices. Waves of strange light washed over the human. Every inch of his body measured, every drop of his blood tested. Every breath he took captured by alien machines. The queen paced like a beast in a cage, her eyes locked on the screens, her claws twitching with impatience. She whispered to herself that it had to be a trick, it had to be false. Yet when the results appeared, silence fell over the hall, because the truth was undeniable. The human had done it, and no device could explain how. The queen's face twisted with rage and confusion. She struck the screens, shattering them into shards that rained across the floor. The nobles gasped but dared not speak. The guards trembled but dared not move. She demanded the scientists to speak again, to find another reason. But they bowed and said it was no trick, no lie. The life inside her was real, and it was growing. The queen staggered back as if struck by lightning, her heart racing with a fear she could not name. She hated the human for what he had done, and yet she could not deny it. Her voice shook the chamber as she ordered the guards to seize him. But when they stepped forward, the human finally spoke, his words calm and steady like before. He told her that what happened was not a crime, not a trick, but a truth her empire had never understood. He said that humans carried something unseen, something no machine could measure, something that reached deeper than science or power. The queen snarled at him, calling him a liar, but his eyes never wavered, and in that gaze she felt the weight of his words. The court whispered in fear, some saying the child inside her was a curse, others saying it was destiny. The nobles argued in low voices, wondering if this meant the rise of a new ruler or the fall of the old order. The queen roared and silenced them all, her voice shaking the pillars. She declared that no one would speak of this again, that anyone who dared spread the secret would be executed. Her fury was so great that even the walls seemed to tremble. Yet inside her, beneath the fury, there was a storm of doubt and terror. She dismissed the court and returned to her chamber, slamming the doors behind her. The human was dragged after her by the guards, his hands bound with chains of glowing energy, yet his face still calm, still unshaken. The queen circled him again like she had the night before, demanding to know how he had done it, what power he carried, what secret he hid. He said nothing for a long moment, only watching her with quiet strength. Then he said that perhaps the universe had chosen this path. Not him, not her, but fate itself. The queen hissed at the word fate, for she had built her empire on strength, not destiny, on power, not chance. Yet the word lingered in her mind like poison. She struck him across the face, Yet he did not cry out. She demanded again and again that he reveal his trick, but he gave her only silence and calm. And this silence broke her more than any scream could. Her fury grew until she roared loud enough to shake the stars. And in her roar was not only anger, but fear. She collapsed onto her throne, her chest heaving, her hand pressed against her stomach. She felt it again, the strange warmth inside her, the impossible spark of life. And she realized that no matter how much she raged, no matter how much she denied, the truth was growing. The human had done what no alien ever could, and now her empire would never be the same. She whispered to herself that she would kill him, that she would end the child, that she would erase this shame. Yet her hand never moved, her claws never struck, because deep inside her, something refused. And as she sat there trembling with fury and fear, the human raised his head and whispered words that made her blood freeze. He said that this was only the beginning. A dangerous secret. The palace felt heavy with silence after the queen's furious outburst. The guards stood outside her chamber afraid to move. The nobles whispered in dark corners afraid to speak too loudly. The scientists argued in hushed tones afraid of what their discovery meant. And at the center of it all sat the queen, her hand pressed against her stomach, her eyes burning with a fire that was not only rage but also fear. Because she knew the truth could not be hidden forever. The life inside her was real and would grow stronger each day. The human male was kept in chains, locked in a cell deep beneath the palace. Yet he did not struggle. He did not cry out. Instead, he sat calmly as if he were waiting for something. The guards mocked him, calling him weak, calling him foolish, saying the queen would tear him apart soon. But he only looked at them with quiet eyes, and his silence unsettled them more than his words ever could. For silence carried weight, and weight carried fear. In the council chamber, the queen summoned her most trusted scientists. They bowed low before her, their eyes shaking as they presented their findings. They explained that the child inside her was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its energy was different, its growth strange, its very presence bending the machines that tried to measure it. They warned her that it could be dangerous. They whispered that it could be a weapon, a curse, or even a savior. But the queen roared at them, demanding that they never use such words again, demanding that they forget the idea of savior, demanding that they only see it as a threat. But in her heart, she could not silence the fear. She could not silence the thought that perhaps this child was more than just a burden, more than just a mistake. She pressed her hand against her stomach again, feeling the warmth. And for the first time in her long reign, she felt powerless. She hated the feeling. She hated the human for giving it to her. Yet she also feared what might happen if she tried to destroy it. For her body resisted her. Her body clung to the life inside her, as if it belonged there. That night, under the watch of the stars, the queen went alone into the cell where the human was chained. Her eyes glowed with fury. But beneath the glow was a storm she could not hide. She demanded answers once more, asking what he had done, asking how a weak human had achieved the impossible. The human lifted his head and said quietly that he had done nothing, that nature itself had chosen this path, that her body had accepted what her pride would never accept, and that the child was proof of a bond that no empire could deny. The queen struck the bars with her claws, sparks flying as her rage cracked the metal. She hissed at him, calling him a liar, calling him a curse. Yet deep down, she remembered the moment her body reacted, the moment her heart skipped, the moment her strength faltered, and she could not deny that he spoke a truth she feared to admit. The human told her that humans carried something invisible, something no machine or power could measure, something that lived in the spirit, and that this something had reached into her, had awakened what no other alien could. The queen turned away, her breath heavy, her claws trembling. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to erase him. But her mind was torn, and in that weakness she knew the danger was greater than she imagined, because if the nobles or the generals learned of this, they would not only come for her, they would come for the child. They would see it as a weapon to control or as a threat to destroy. And already whispers had begun in the shadows. Whispers of betrayal, whispers of assassination, whispers of a coup. Far across the empire, rival leaders heard rumors carried by frightened servants. They laughed at first, but then their laughter faded into fear. For if the rumor was true, if the queen carried a child of human blood, then the balance of power would shatter. Some believed the child could unite the galaxy. Others feared it could destroy them all. Secret meetings began. Fleets were prepared in silence, and assassins sharpened their blades, waiting for the moment to strike. Back in the palace, the queen summoned her generals and ordered them to increase her guard. She told them nothing of the truth. She only said that enemies plotted against her. She swore that she would crush them all, her voice sharp and cold. But when she returned to her chamber, she fell into silence, her hand once more resting on her stomach, her thoughts circling like predators in the dark. She hated herself for feeling fear, hated herself for feeling doubt, but the feelings would not leave her. The human remained calm in his cell, watching, waiting, as if he knew the storm was coming. When the guards mocked him again, he simply said that the queen would need him soon, that her enemies would come, and that the child would not survive without him. The guards spat at him, laughed at him, but when they left they could not shake the weight of his words, for something about his calm voice carried truth, and truth was a blade sharper than steel. As the night deepened, the queen stood at her window, staring at the stars. The fire of rage in her heart slowly mixed with a strange feeling she did not want to name. She told herself it was only fear, only hate, but the more she thought, the more she wondered if there was something else, something growing not only inside her body, but also inside her soul. She clenched her fists and swore that she would never bow to fate. Yet fate was already moving. Fate was already writing a story she could not erase. And somewhere in the dark corners of the palace, shadows moved, blades were prepared, and the first step of betrayal was about to begin. The hunt begins. The night was heavy with silence across the empire as shadows gathered around the queen's palace. Enemies who once bowed to her throne now moved like wolves in the dark, blades sharpened, poison prepared, whispers carried on cold winds. They came not only for the queen, but also for the life inside her. The life they feared and hated, the life they wanted destroyed before it could be born. Inside the palace, the queen felt the shift in the air, her instincts sharp as fire warned her of betrayal. Her generals had sworn loyalty, yet her heart told her that loyalty was fragile. She stood in her chamber with her hand resting on her stomach, her claws twitching, her anger rising. She knew the empire she built with blood was now turning against her, and at the center of it all was the child. The impossible child of human blood. The human male sat in his cell far below, his eyes closed as if in sleep. But when the first explosion shook the palace walls, his eyes opened at once. Calm yet sharp, he knew they had come. He whispered to himself that fate was moving faster now. The guards outside his cell ran in panic, shouting orders, clashing with enemies who slipped through the shadows. And still he remained steady, waiting for the moment he would be called upon. The queen stormed into the great hall, her soldiers clashing with assassins in a storm of steel and fire. Her roar shook the pillars as she cut down those who dared to face her. Her fury burned brighter than the flames rising around her. Yet for each enemy that fell more came, their faces twisted with hatred, their blades aimed not only at her, but at the secret she carried inside. She fought like a beast, yet the tide was endless. Her advisors screamed for her to escape, to flee into the deep chambers, but the queen would not run. She was fire, she was storm, she was rage itself, and she swore she would burn them all. But as the battles raged, her mind flickered to the cell below, to the human who had spoken of fate and survival. She hated the thought of needing him. Yet the voice inside her whispered that he was part of this, that without him she might not endure. The palace walls cracked with another explosion. Smoke poured through the halls. Assassins swarmed with blades dripping in venom. The queen tore through them, her claws rending metal, her voice a roar of thunder. Yet still they pushed closer, closer to her, closer to the child, closer to the future they feared. And for the first time in centuries, she felt something strange. She felt the shadow of defeat. In the chaos, the human was dragged from his cell by two frightened guards, chains still glowing around his wrists. They begged him to move quickly. They shouted that the queen herself had demanded his presence. He walked calmly through fire and smoke, his eyes steady, his voice quiet as he told them that this was only the beginning. When they reached the grand hall, the queen's eyes locked on him, fury and hate burning in her gaze. Yet beneath the fury was something else, something she could not name. She shouted at him, asking why her enemies had come, asking if this too was his trick, but before he could answer, a group of assassins leapt forward with blades aimed at her chest. The human moved faster than the guards expected, breaking his chains against the shattered floor, his hands grabbing a fallen weapon, his body moving with a strength that shocked even her elite soldiers. He cut through the assassins with silent focus, his courage shining brighter than the flames, and the court gasped. For the weak human had become a shield between them and death. The queen stared in disbelief as the human fought with unshaken resolve, his strikes precise, his movements like a storm guided by purpose. He took wounds yet did not falter. He bled yet did not fall. And in that moment she saw him not as weak, but as something else, something dangerous, something powerful. Her heart twisted with anger and confusion, but also with a spark of respect she could not crush. Together they fought back the wave of assassins, the queen's claws tearing through armor, the human's blades striking with deadly force. Fire raged around them. Screams echoed through the halls. Yet side by side they carved a path of survival, their enemies falling one after another. And though they came from different worlds, though she despised him, she could not deny that their strength together was greater than her strength alone. When the last assassin fell, the palace was broken, the air thick with smoke and ash. The queen stood panting, her chest rising and falling, her hand on her stomach once more. The human stood beside her, wounded but still steady, his eyes locked on hers. He told her that this was only the first hunt, that greater storms would come, that the empire itself would rise against her and the child. She snarled at him, swearing that she would crush anyone who dared. Yet in her heart she knew his words were true. The queen ordered the survivors to rebuild, her generals to hunt down the traitors, her court to remain silent. But as she walked back into the ruined chamber, she carried a new weight. Not only the child inside her, but the truth that she could not face this war alone. The human followed her in silence, his wounds bleeding, his steps steady. And though she hated the thought, she knew she would need him again. And high above, the stars watched in silence, as if waiting for the next move in a game far greater than empires, far greater than crowns, far greater than the fury of even the strongest queen. A bond forged in fire. The palace lay in ruins after the battle. Smoke rose into the night sky, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the broken halls. The queen stood in silence upon the shattered steps of her throne, her claws stained with blood, her eyes glowing with fury and exhaustion. Beside her stood the human, wounded yet steady, his breath heavy but his gaze unbroken. The nobles watched in disbelief, none daring to speak, for they had seen what no one thought possible, a human standing shoulder to shoulder with their queen, fighting like an equal. The queen dismissed her court with a roar, ordering them to leave her sight. She turned and walked into the private chamber with the human following. Guards tried to drag him away, but she raised her hand and stopped them, her voice sharp and commanding. She declared that he would remain close until she decided otherwise. Whispers filled the shadows, some calling him a cursed weapon, others calling him a chosen protector. But none dared to question her command. Fear held their tongues. In the chamber, the queen sat upon a broken chair, her hand resting again on her stomach, the fire of battle fading into a storm of thought. She looked at the human and asked why he fought with such courage, why he risked his life when he knew her rage could end him at any moment. The human replied in his calm voice that he did not fight for her crown or her pride. He fought because life was growing inside her, and life must be protected. His words cut through the air like truth sharper than blades, and the queen felt her chest tighten. For the first time in her long reign, she did not know how to respond. Her lips trembled with words unsaid. Her claws curled with frustration. She hated him for speaking so simply, for making her feel weak. Yet at the same time, a strange warmth stirred in her chest, a warmth she had never known. She told herself it was only confusion, only exhaustion, yet the feeling remained. and it grew stronger as she watched him bind his wounds with his bare hands. No complaint, no fear, only quiet strength. Days passed, and the palace slowly rebuilt itself. The queen led her army with her usual fury, but she kept the human close, not out of trust, but out of something she refused to name. He walked beside her in silence, sometimes speaking of earth, of rivers and forests, of skies filled with birds, simple things she had never seen, strange things she could not imagine. She listened without meaning to, and the images lingered in her mind long after the words were gone, like sparks glowing in the dark. At night, she sat by the fire with her hand on her stomach, the human often sitting across from her, their silence heavy yet not empty. He told her stories of human families, of mothers and fathers who protected their children even in the darkest times. She mocked the weakness of such words, yet she could not stop thinking about them. She had ruled with power and fear. She had never cared for family, never cared for love. Yet now those words whispered through her heart like seeds taking root in hard soil. When another band of assassins struck in the night, the queen rose with fire in her veins, the human at her side once more. Together they fought through the dark halls, her claws ripping through armor, his blade flashing with deadly precision. Each battle carved their bond deeper, each fight tied their fates closer. And though she snarled at him in anger, though she called him weak in words, she knew deep inside that without him she might not survive. And that truth frightened her more than any enemy. One night, as they rested near the fire after battle, the queen turned her gaze to him and asked why he never feared her, why he never trembled before her rage. The human looked at her calmly and said that fear had no power when truth was stronger. He said he saw not only a queen of fury, but also a mother carrying a future, and that future was worth standing against death. Her heart shook at his words. She wanted to roar, to deny, but no sound came. Only silence, only thought, only a quiet, trembling inside her. The queen began to change in small ways she did not notice at first. Her voice softened at times. Her eyes lingered on him longer than she wished. Her fury still burned, but it was no longer endless. Confusion tangled with anger, and anger tangled with something else, something she could not admit, something dangerous, something that made her question her own strength, for she had ruled through hate. Yet now she felt the weight of something she had never carried before. As the stars burned above them one night, the queen finally whispered words she thought she would never say. Her voice low, her gaze fixed on the fire. She asked what if she did not hate him. The human looked at her in silence, then slowly bowed his head. He gave no words, only quiet acceptance, and that silence carried more weight than any answer. The queen turned away, her chest heavy, her claws trembling, knowing that a bond had been forged, a bond she feared and desired all at once. And in that moment, she realized the fire around them was not only from battle, it was from something growing inside her, something no crown could control, something no empire could erase. The birth of a legend. The empire shook with unrest as whispers spread like fire. Some spoke of a queen carrying a cursed child. Others spoke of a savior born from the joining of two worlds. Fleets gathered in hidden corners of space, blades sharpened in the hands of traitors. Voices rose in secret councils demanding the end of the queen before her child could draw its first breath. War brewed in every shadow, and the queen knew the storm would soon break. In the throne hall she stood tall before her court, her hand resting upon her stomach, her eyes burning with the fire of command. She declared that no enemy would take her crown, no blade would touch her child, and no traitor would live. Her words echoed through the pillars like thunder. Yet behind her rage was a fear she could not share, a fear that perhaps the war would be greater than even she could fight alone. And in that fear her gaze shifted toward the human who stood beside her, silent, yet unshaken. The nobles glared at him with hatred, calling him a curse in whispers, calling him a danger. Yet none dared to raise their voice too high, for the queen's fury was sharp and swift. Still the seeds of rebellion grew. Armies gathered at the edge of the empire, banners raised against the queen. Some sought to destroy the child. Others sought to steal it and claim its power. and soon the sky above the palace filled with the lights of warships, engines roaring like thunder across the stars. The queen prepared for battle, her armor shining with the glow of ancient fire, her claws sharpened for blood, her heart burning with the rage of a ruler who refused to bow. Yet as she stood ready, she felt a tremor in her chest. Not of fear, but of something deeper, something tied to the child inside her. And she knew this fight was not only for her throne, it was for the life that grew within, the life that carried both her blood and the blood of a human. The human male stood at her side, his wounds healed from battles past, his eyes steady as stone. He carried no crown, no power, no army, yet his presence filled the hall like a shield of calm. The queen turned to him and asked why he stood without fear even as the galaxy rose against them. He replied that fear could not bend the future, and the future was already being written inside her. His words struck her heart like a hidden flame, and though she snarled at him, she could not hide the truth. That his voice gave her strength. When the enemy fleets descended upon the capital, the sky burned with fire. Explosions shook the palace, towers crumbled, and the walls trembled as armies marched. The queen roared and led her warriors into the fray, her claws tearing through armor, her voice shaking the battlefield. Beside her, the human fought with unyielding resolve, his blade flashing with courage, his body a storm of movement. Together they cut a path through endless waves, their enemies falling like dust before a hurricane. The sight of them fighting side by side sent fear into the hearts of many, for it was clear they were no longer just ruler and prisoner, but something greater. Through the chaos, the queen felt the time drawing near, the child within her stirring with power, her body weakening though her fury burned. She knew she could not fight forever. She called her forces to retreat into the deep chambers beneath the palace. There in the heart of the stone wall, she prepared for the moment she feared and awaited, the moment of birth, while the war raged above them. She sat surrounded by firelight, her breath heavy, her claws gripping stone, her roar echoing through the halls. The human knelt beside her, holding her steady, his hands strong though his face was calm. He told her she was not alone. He told her to fight not with rage, but with strength of spirit. She wanted to snarl, to deny his words, but the pain tore through her and silenced her pride. For the first time in her life, she let another stand beside her in her moment of weakness. The hall shook with every cry, every surge of power, until finally the chamber was filled with silence, a silence deeper than any battle, a silence heavy with destiny. The queen lifted her eyes and saw the child in her arms, small yet radiant, its skin glowing faintly with a light unknown to either species, its gaze sharp though newborn, as if the stars themselves had bent close to witness its arrival. The queen trembled, her claws gentle for the first time in her life. The human looked upon the child with awe, and together they felt the weight of what had been born, neither alien nor human, but something beyond, something that carried the fire of both worlds. Above, the war raged on, but when word spread that the child had been born, the empire grew silent. Soldiers lowered their blades. Nobles fell to their knees, for in their hearts they felt it too. The shift of destiny, the beginning of a legend that would outlive crowns and empires. Some feared it, some worshipped it, but none could deny it. The galaxy itself seemed to bow, as if the stars had chosen their new ruler. The queen sat with the child in her arms, her fury softened, her heart trembling. She looked at the human, and for the first time did not see weakness. She saw the reason the impossible had become real. She whispered that the galaxy would never forgive them, that enemies would rise again. Yet the human only smiled softly and said that the galaxy would learn, for legends were not forgiven or forgotten, they were eternal. And this was only the beginning. And so beneath the burning sky, amid the ruins of war, a child's cry marked the birth of a legend that would change the fate of worlds forever.